Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Jack Whitlow. I'm 46 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I was the Senior Director of Operations at Whitlow & Sons Construction, a company my grandfather built with grit, calloused hands, and a stubborn will that's apparently skipped a generation. I helped take that company from a modest regional contractor to a major player in the commercial development space across 4 states. Over 23 years, I put in more than I had to give, my time, my family, my marriage. But it was worth it. Or at least, I thought it was. Then came the board meeting. It was supposed to be routine. Quarterly strategy session. Coffee, stale muffins, and the usual jockeying for capital budget allocation. Instead, my younger brother, Travis, walked in like he owned the place, which, I guess now, he sort of did. He wore one of those tailored suits he likes so much, all smug confidence and calculated charm. "I think it's time for fresh ideas," Travis said, his eyes locked on mine. "Not old blood." I blinked. The words hung in the air like smoke after a blast. There was no confusion about who he was targeting. I looked around the room. No one met my gaze. Pete, our uncle and longtime board member, stared down at his notes. Lynn from finance shifted uncomfortably. Not one person stood up for me. "Wow," I muttered. "That's bold." I didn't shout. I didn't argue. That would have been giving Travis exactly what he wanted, a scene, a spectacle, a reason to paint me as emotionally unstable and resistant to change. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and walked out. Just like that. Not because I was weak. But because I had already seen it coming. Travis was 4 years younger than me. Always the golden child. Private school. Ivy League. Fancy internships. While I was pouring concrete at 5 a.m., Travis was presenting PowerPoints to men in suits. Dad always said we'd run the company together someday. I guess Travis didn't get the memo about the "together" part. The truth? I had been quietly preparing for this moment for almost a year. He thought he'd won. He had no idea. I sat in the parking lot that day, staring at the company logo I'd known since childhood. 23 years. Gone in a boardroom ambush. I pulled out my phone and opened the email I'd received just the day before, from Ben Harding at Crestline Properties. They were finalizing their deal with JW Buildworks, my new company. My secret company. They were ditching Whitlow & Sons entirely. Travis didn't know it yet, but in firing me, he'd just cut the company's beating heart out of its chest. He thought I was just some operations guy. What he didn't realize was that every major client, Crestline, Riverview, Blackstone, Westfield, every single one of them worked with Whitlow & Sons because of me. They didn't trust the name. They trusted me. It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow bleed, Travis's betrayal. First, he stopped CCing me on financial reviews. Then he brought in a bunch of outside consultants who suddenly started weighing in on projects they didn't understand. He'd whisper to the board that I was old school, that I was good at managing but didn't have the vision for the company's future. Funny thing is, while he was dreaming about IPOs and expansion, I was the one getting steel delivered on time and permits approved ahead of schedule. I was the one who personally made sure the Meridian Tower project got done 6 weeks early and $1.2 million under budget. But none of that mattered to Travis. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a crown. I got in my truck and drove away from the office for what I thought would be the last time. But I wasn't defeated. Not even close. I'd already filed the paperwork for JW Buildworks 6 months earlier. I'd opened a line of credit, rented a tiny office above an old accountant's practice, and had been having quiet conversations with key project managers and subcontractors, just in case. And now. The "just in case" was now. I sat down at my desk at the new place. No frills, just a cheap desk and an even cheaper chair. But it felt like freedom. I opened the folder labeled Foundations. Inside were the letters of intent from my top clients, every one of them pledging their future projects to me the moment I was no longer tied to Whitlow and Sons. My phone rang. It was Travis. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. Finally, I picked up. "Jack, what the hell is going on?" he barked. "Is there a problem?" I asked, sipping my coffee. "Ben Harding just pulled the Crestline account. Says they've signed with some outfit called JW Buildworks." I smiled. "Sounds like you've got a problem." There was a pause. I could almost hear him blinking. "Did you do this?" "I secured my future. Just like you did." "You stole our clients." "No," I said calmly. "I earned their trust. I didn't violate any contracts. I never signed a non-compete. I didn't solicit while I was still at the company. They chose to follow me. This isn't over." "Oh, it is. You fired the only person holding your foundation together." And then I hung up. I didn't feel the triumphant rush I expected. I felt empty. 23 years. Betrayed by my own brother. But this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. I wish I could tell you that after that call with Travis, I leaned back in my chair and smiled, that I felt vindicated, justified, even proud. But the truth? I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall, feeling nothing. The silence was deafening. I was alone. No assistant outside my door. No team waiting for project updates. No familiar rhythm of job site calls and client check-ins. Just an empty office with a coffee stain on the particle board desk and a faint hum from the fluorescent light above me. This was freedom. This was what I'd been building toward. Maybe I'd miscalculated. I'd poured everything I had into that company. Sacrificed time with my daughter. Lost my marriage to the long nights and early mornings. And for what? To be pushed aside like a disposable cog by my own brother. And now I was free, yes, but I was also unprotected. I had no infrastructure. No admin staff. No insurance set up yet. No equipment. No field team. Just a stack of promises and a name, JW Buildworks, that meant nothing unless I could deliver. And that's when the cracks started showing. The next day, I got a call from Steve Martin, not the comedian, the electrical subcontractor I'd worked with for over a decade. He sounded nervous. "Jack, man, look, I don't know how to say this. Travis just called. Said anyone who works with you is blacklisted from Whitlow projects indefinitely." I closed my eyes. Steve continued, "He said he'd pull 3 jobs I'm already on. I got crews depending on that income, Jack. I can't afford to risk it." "I'm sorry." That wasn't the last call. Over the next 48 hours, I lost my top framing crew, HVAC vendor, and site foreman. Not because they didn't trust me, but because they couldn't afford to be caught in the crossfire. Whitlow and Sons still had dozens of projects running. I had 0 under construction. Travis wasn't just trying to protect his company anymore. He was trying to burn mine to the ground before it even broke dirt. I sat alone in that empty office that night, lights off, city lights outside flickering through the dusty blinds. I'd never felt more defeated. He was winning. The next morning, I drove out to my parents' house for the first time in weeks. They lived on a big property out on the edge of town, 5 acres of rolling Nebraska grass, a wraparound porch, and a dozen memories baked into every square inch. Dad was sitting outside in a faded flannel shirt, hands folded, staring out at the tree line like he always did when something heavy was on his mind. He didn't turn when I sat down beside him. "Your brother tells me you're trying to sink the company," he said quietly. I bit back the frustration rising in my throat. I'm trying to build something of my own, Dad. He fired me. Dad finally turned to look at me. His eyes, always sharp, always full of quiet command, were heavier now, burdened. He says you took the biggest clients with you. That they were promised to the bank. That made my stomach drop. What do you mean, promised to the bank? Dad sighed. Travis borrowed heavily against projected revenue from those 5 accounts. He didn't tell you? No, I said, stunned. He didn't tell me anything. I didn't even know we had that kind of debt. We didn't, Dad said bitterly. Not when I left. But he's been aggressive. Expansion plans. Consultants. He convinced the board it was necessary. I leaned forward. How bad is it? Bad. Without those clients, the bank could call in the loans. If they do, the company won't survive it. I stared down at my hands. I didn't know, I whispered. I believe you, Dad said. But you need to know what's at stake. This isn't just between you and Travis anymore. He was right. This wasn't just personal. This was catastrophic. I drove home that night on autopilot. For the first time since the boardroom ambush, doubts started creeping in. What if I had just caused the collapse of my father's legacy? What if hundreds of employees lost their jobs because I wanted justice? Was I still the good guy in this story? Or had I become the villain without realizing it? The next day, my lawyer called. The Whitlow board was preparing a lawsuit. Claims of corporate sabotage. Breach of fiduciary duty. Interference with contractual relationships. We can beat this, she said confidently. You've been careful. You haven't broken any laws. But the damage would be real. Months of litigation. Legal bills. A tarnished name before I'd even poured a single foundation. And worst of all, Travis's smear campaign was working. I was being painted as the bitter brother. The traitor. The one who broke the family apart out of ego and resentment. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know the hours I'd spent keeping that company from collapsing under its own weight while Travis played CEO in corner offices. They didn't know the lies he told me. The meetings he excluded me from. The deals he cut behind my back. But it didn't matter. Perception was reality now. And I was losing the war. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up in my little office with a legal pad in front of me, scribbling names. Who was still loyal? Who could I count on? Who might be willing to work with me quietly, even with Travis trying to ruin them? At 3 a.m., I put the pen down and stared at the list. There were maybe 6 names I could count on. 6 people against an empire. Not enough. Unless I stopped thinking like a victim, and started thinking like the operator I used to be. If Travis wanted to fight dirty, fine. But I wasn't going to burn the house down. I was going to rebuild my own. Stronger. Smarter. Unbreakable. The morning after the sleepless night, I woke up with something I hadn't felt in days, clarity. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. Not entirely. This was about legacy, mine, my father's, even Travis's, though he didn't deserve it. The company we all bled for was sitting on the edge of a cliff, and we were all about to fall. Unless I found leverage. Real leverage. I went to see Uncle Pete. He'd been Dad's right hand for nearly 30 years and still held a seat on the board. I found him in the back of his workshop, tinkering with an old Harley that hadn't run in 10 years. "You got guts, showing up here," he said without looking up. "I've got questions," I replied. "You've also got a lawsuit headed your way." "Then I need answers fast." He wiped his hands, nodded for me to sit on the bench near the tool wall. We didn't talk about feelings. We talked about facts. "How deep are the loans?" I asked. "Too deep," he said. Travis borrowed against 5 future projects. 3 of those were with your clients. And now those projects are mine. Pete nodded. The bank's already circling. If they call in the loans, Whitlow and Sons is done. Why would Travis risk that kind of exposure? Because he's not just borrowing for expansion, Pete said, voice low. He's covering losses. That stopped me cold. What losses? He over-leveraged into a market in Colorado last year, without board approval. Quiet deals with shady developers. He moved money around to make it look like the books were balanced. They weren't. You're telling me he cooked the books? I'm telling you he's desperate, Pete replied. And when desperate men are handed power, they'll burn the foundation to warm their hands. I spent the rest of the day going over what Pete told me. Something didn't add up. I'd reviewed the quarterly statements before I was ousted, and there were no signs of major losses. That meant only one thing: Travis had helped covering it up. I called Sophia Chen from Blackstone Commercial. Sophia had always been sharp. Unshakable. We trusted each other. If there was anyone who could give me a clue, it was her. Jack, she said. I wasn't expecting your call. Do you have a few minutes? For you. Always. I laid out what I'd learned, carefully, leaving out names. She listened. Asked questions. Took notes. Then she dropped a bomb I wasn't ready for. We received a financial disclosure document from Whitlow and Sons 2 weeks ago, she said. It showed your signature on a commitment letter for the Riverview expansion. I froze. I never signed anything. I figured as much. That's why I didn't pursue the deal. They're forging my name now. Or someone is, she said. Either way, if what you're saying is true, there's a lot more going on behind the curtain. She offered to email me the document. When it came through, my hands shook. It was a perfect forgery, my signature, my letterhead, my wording. But I'd never touched this document in my life. It wasn't just bad business now. It was fraud. And if the bank had used that document as part of their loan decision, then Travis hadn't just endangered the company. He'd committed a felony. I called my lawyer. She listened in silence, then said 3 words that changed everything. This is leverage. If this gets out, I asked, how bad could it get? Very. It would kill the lawsuit. Flip the board against Travis. And if proven, it could land him in jail. For a moment, I sat there, stunned. This was the nuclear button. But did I want to press it? I could destroy him. End this. But the collateral damage. My dad. The employees. Our name. Everything. I needed time to think. So I drove. Out past the edge of town. Through cornfields and open sky. I ended up back at the old job site where we built Meridian Tower. 10 years ago, I stood on that bare foundation with my boots in the dirt, dreaming about legacy. Now I stood there again, older, angrier, wiser, wondering what kind of man I'd become. Travis had already betrayed me. But if I used this against him, was I betraying everything else? Then I remembered something Dad used to say. Real builders know when to tear it down. And when to shore it up. Maybe this wasn't about destruction. Maybe this was about forcing him to see the cracks, and making sure he couldn't cover them anymore. That night, I called 5 people, my top 5 clients. I didn't threaten. I didn't beg. I told them the truth. That Whitlow and Sons was in trouble. That the man running it had been hiding the rot. That I had proof, but I wanted a peaceful solution. I'm not asking you to give business back to my brother, I told them. I'm asking you to consider working with both of us, on strict terms. I keep oversight of the jobs. He gets to save face. And we avoid collapse. To my surprise, they didn't hang up. They listened. They respected the transparency. They agreed to meet. The next morning, I called Travis. He didn't answer. So I left a message. Meet me. One-on-one. Tomorrow. 7 a.m. My office. No lawyers. No board. Just us. Then I sent one final email, an encrypted attachment of the forged commitment letter, to a private inbox I knew only Travis used. I didn't include a threat. Just a subject line. I know. The next morning at 7 o'clock sharp, Travis walked into my office. His posture had changed. No confident swagger. No designer sunglasses on his head. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, disheveled, eyes ringed with red, jaw clenched. I didn't offer him coffee. Didn't offer a handshake. I just pointed to the chair across from me. He sat. "What do you want, Jack?" he muttered. "Not what you think." He narrowed his eyes. "Then why did you send me that?" I leaned forward. "Because I need you to understand exactly how deep you've dug this hole, and how far I'm willing to go if you keep trying to bury me." Travis's jaw tightened. "I didn't forge your name," he said, voice low. "But someone did," I snapped. "Under your watch. Under your direction. On a deal the board never even approved." He didn't deny it. "That was the first real sign of guilt. The clients are pulling away from you," I continued. "The subcontractors are afraid of both of us. The bank is ready to get your financing, and you're about 36 hours away from watching Dad's legacy collapse completely." Travis said nothing. "I'm not here to save you," I said. "I'm here to offer you a way out." He scoffed. "You think I want your help? I think you need it." I slid the proposal across the desk. He didn't touch it. JW Buildworks and Whitlow and Sons enter a formal partnership. We split the clients, 3 for Whitlow, 2 for me. I oversee execution on all 5. The board names an interim CEO, someone neutral. Not you. Not me. Dad, if necessary. He laughed bitterly. "You want me to step down? After everything I've done?" "Exactly because of everything you've done." For a moment, I thought he was going to throw the paper back in my face. Instead, he stared at it like it was a mirror he wasn't ready to look into. Finally, he spoke. "You know the worst part? I didn't even want the CEO role at first. That caught me off guard." "I thought you were born for that office," I replied. He shook his head slowly. "Dad always compared me to you. No matter what I achieved, I was always second best. You were the one who got your hands dirty. You were the one the crews respected. Clients listened to you. Even Mom used to say, you should be more like your brother." I thought, if I took the company, I could finally stop being second. I didn't speak. Not out of sympathy, but because I finally understood something. Travis hadn't just fired me to get ahead. He'd done it because he couldn't live in my shadow anymore. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I asked. "I didn't think you'd let go." "I wouldn't have," I admitted. "But I would have worked with you." He laughed again, bitter. "Too late for that now." "Maybe not," I said. "If we work together, even temporarily, we can both survive this. You keep a stake in the company. I keep building mine. But if you fight me, I go public. I bring the documents, the forgeries, the forged commitment letters to the bank. The lawsuit vanishes. Your reputation evaporates." He looked down at the paper. Still not touching it. "I don't trust you," he whispered. "That's fine," I said. "Just trust the consequences." He left without signing. But I knew he'd return. Because desperation is louder than pride. And by sunset, I had an email in my inbox. Subject line: Let's talk terms. The next 72 hours were a flurry of negotiations. I brought my lawyer in. Travis brought his. We drafted the deal line by line. Whitlow and Sons would formally enter a temporary operational partnership with JW Buildworks. The forged documents would be internally investigated, with the party responsible, an external consultant, terminated and reported. Travis would voluntarily step aside as CEO and take a board advisory role. Our father, Paul Whitlow, would return temporarily as interim CEO to stabilize the company. A third-party construction executive, neutral and experienced, would be appointed within 90 days. But one condition was non-negotiable. If Travis tried to sabotage the partnership again, the documentation I had would go straight to the authorities and the press. Meanwhile, I began rebuilding JW Buildworks from the inside out. I called every subcontractor who'd backed out and offered double the risk insurance. Some still hesitated. Others agreed immediately. Steve Martin, the electrical guy, even said, "Jack, I knew you'd land on your feet. Let me know when you break ground, I'm there." I hired 2 rising stars from our old competitor, and they brought with them a combined 30 years of site experience and a Rolodex of contacts. Ben Harding from Crestline was the first client to sign an updated project commitment letter. Blackstone followed within the week. For the first time in months, I exhaled. We were finally stabilizing. And the best part? The lawsuit was off the table. I got a call from Dad a week later. "Travis told me everything," he said. "That must have been awkward," I replied. He cried. I was silent for a moment. "Jack," Dad continued, "I know what he did. I don't excuse it. But thank you, for not taking the whole thing down. I don't know if I would have been as measured. You built something worth preserving," I said. "Even if your sons almost destroyed it." There was a long pause. "You always were the builder," he said finally. Travis was just the blueprint guy. It was the closest he'd ever come to admitting he'd picked the wrong heir. And somehow, that mattered more than anything. They say construction is all about execution. You can have the best designs, the most experienced crew, the perfect weather, but if the execution's sloppy, everything collapses. Same goes for revenge. And make no mistake, even though we called it a partnership, this was still my revenge, just dressed in a clean shirt and a handshake. Because I wasn't going to destroy Travis. No. I was going to rebuild everything he tried to steal from me, and make sure everyone saw who was holding the hammer. Our partnership deal was officially signed 2 weeks later at a private board meeting. My father sat at the head of the table again, looking 10 years older but 20 pounds lighter, as if the truth had peeled off layers of stress he hadn't known he was carrying. Travis sat across from me, quiet, pale, his usual arrogance muted into something more digestible. The forged documents had been reviewed internally. The consultant who prepared them was gone. No police, no press. Just controlled demolition. Exactly how I wanted it. The first order of business: stabilize the 5 critical projects. 3 went back under Whitlow and Sons. 2 stayed with JW Buildworks. I took lead on coordination for all 5, just as promised. That meant weekly check-ins, budget alignment, and oversight on subcontractor work. And here's where Travis thought he'd pull a fast one. He tried to sneak his own people back onto the Crestline job. I found out when a site supervisor called me confused, asking why someone from Travis's old management team was suddenly trying to change the blueprint specifications. I was livid. This was sabotage. But instead of storming over to Travis's house or calling a board meeting, I did what I always do. I documented everything. Emails. Calls. Time-stamped orders. Client communications. Then I confronted Travis with a file folder that could have buried him all over again. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" I asked, tossing it on his desk. He didn't even try to defend himself. You're not used to losing, are you? I said. He said nothing. You got your seat back at the table because I let you keep it. Don't make me regret it. His face turned red, but this time, he looked down instead of exploding. That's when I knew the power dynamic had officially shifted. This wasn't about payback anymore. This was about control. And now, I had it. By month 3, JW Buildworks had turned from a tiny startup above an accountant's office into a legitimate player. We hired 20 new people, moved into a proper workspace, and picked up 2 more mid-sized commercial contracts. Even better, our name was starting to carry weight. Clients said things like, "Jack's company? They're solid. You know he used to run the real show at Whitlow and Sons. If you want a job done right, go with JW." Meanwhile, Whitlow was still licking its wounds. Dad was doing what he could as interim CEO, but Travis? He'd faded into the background. Silent during board meetings. Absent from client calls. His own employees no longer knew if they should follow his orders. He was becoming what he feared most, irrelevant. Then came the awards banquet. The Nebraska Builders Association hosted an annual event honoring major players in commercial development. I'd never attended before, I was too busy on job sites. But this year, JW Buildworks had been nominated for Emerging Firm of the Year. The ceremony was black tie. Fancy venue. Open bar. The kind of place Travis usually thrived in. And when I walked in that night, all eyes turned to me. Not to Travis. Not to Whitlow and Sons. To me. I was standing near the bar, nursing a scotch, when Ben Harding from Crestline came over and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You know," he said, "you were always the one we trusted. Now the whole industry's starting to figure that out." I gave him a polite smile. Took them long enough. He leaned in a little closer. "Your brother's been asking around again. Quietly. Feels like he's planning something." That caught my attention. "What kind of something?" "No idea. But he's not done, Jack. Not yet." When I got home that night, I couldn't shake the warning. So I started digging. I reviewed vendor reports. Checked billing accounts linked to Whitlow's side of the projects. And that's when I found it. One of Travis's shell LLCs, TDC Consulting, had started invoicing one of the shared job sites for site strategy services. Services no one had authorized. Not me. Not the client. Not even my father. Travis was trying to siphon money out of the shared jobs. And worse, he was doing it behind everyone's back again. I didn't get mad. I got precise. The next day, I called a private meeting. Just me, Dad, the board, and one document package. I laid it all out. The secret LLC. The fake invoices. The accounts it tied to. The specific job site funds being redirected. Then I stood up, looked directly at my brother, and said, "You don't get another second chance." He stammered. Blamed the accountant. Blamed an intern. Blamed anyone but himself. But no one believed him anymore. Not even Dad. The board voted to remove him permanently from all business operations and ban his access to internal accounts. His advisory role was dissolved. His keycard deactivated. His name pulled from the website. He walked out of that boardroom a ghost. And this time, no one followed him. The partnership agreement stayed in place, for now. But everyone knew the real leadership had shifted. Not to Travis. Not even back to Dad. But to me. Jack Whitlow. The builder. The quiet storm. The guy who got shoved out of his own family company, and built something better from the rubble. I thought Travis was the last snake in the grass. Thought I'd seen every angle, patched every crack in the foundation. I'd exposed the fraud, taken back control, and restored my reputation. I was wrong. Because the most dangerous betrayals don't come from your enemies. They come from the ones you trusted to stand beside you. It started with a phone call from Sophia Chen, my trusted contact at Blackstone Commercial. "Jack, we need to talk. It's urgent." She never called like that. We usually kept things over email, calm, professional, by the book. So when her voice trembled on the other end of the line, I sat up straighter. "What's going on?" "It's about the Riverview project," she said. "I just got a copy of the revised permits and build schedule, and they list TDC Consulting as a co-manager." My blood ran cold. TDC Consulting. The shell company Travis created. The one we'd already buried in front of the board. The one he was supposedly cut off from. "He's still operating." "I thought you cut him out." "I did," I said. "Legally, contractually, he shouldn't have access to anything." Sophia paused. "Then how the hell did he get his hands on your project?" I went back to my office and pulled every document I had on the Riverview deal. That's when I saw it. One of my own team members, Alan Knox, my procurement manager, had digitally signed off on a third-party, project consultant integration. Buried in the wording was a quiet clause granting TDC access to internal schedules and coordination tools. Alan. The guy I hired personally. The guy I'd worked with for 8 years at Whitlow and Sons. The guy who'd cried when I offered him a spot at JW Buildworks. And he'd sold me out. I didn't confront him right away. Instead, I watched. Over the next 2 days, I quietly tracked email activity, internal comms, and invoice traffic. Alan had routed over $75,000 in consulting fees to TDC Consulting over the last 3 months. Small amounts at first. Easy to miss. But collectively, it was embezzlement. And coordinated sabotage. He wasn't just helping Travis survive. He was helping him rebuild, using my company's structure. The worst part? I saw it coming. I just hadn't wanted to believe it. Because when you're rebuilding your life, you cling to the familiar. You tell yourself loyalty lasts longer than ambition. But Alan didn't see JW Buildworks as a vision. He saw it as a launch pad. Just like Travis had. And that meant I had one more demolition to do, this time inside my own walls. I called a meeting. Small. Private. Just the leadership team and Alan. Everyone thought it was a regular weekly status update. Until I stood at the front of the conference room and clicked the first slide of a PowerPoint titled, "The Second Betrayal." Alan's face paled before I even said a word. I laid it all out, time-stamped transactions, IP address logs, invoice trails, approval patterns. Then I hit them with the final slide. $75, $260 from JW Buildworks to a fraudulent shell company. Silence. Everyone turned to Alan. He stood, stammered something about being pressured and misled, but I shut it down. "You weren't misled," I said coldly. "You were bought." He tried to speak again. I didn't let him. "You're terminated immediately. Your access has already been revoked. Legal action will follow. And if you or Travis try to spin this, just know I have enough documentation to bury both of you." He looked at me like he'd just realized I wasn't the same man who walked out of that Whitlow boardroom months ago. Because I wasn't. That man was humiliated. This one was unbreakable. After Alan was gone, I sat with my leadership team and had the most honest conversation we'd ever had. "We are not just a construction firm," I told them. "We are a new beginning. But if we lose our integrity, if we let ambition rot us from the inside, we're no better than what I walked away from." No one said a word. But they didn't need to. From that day forward, loyalty at JW Buildworks was earned, not inherited. As for Travis, He'd been trying to sneak back into the industry using Alan's access, hoping to piggyback off our builds while rebuilding his own pipeline under the radar. But the second Sophia from Blackstone heard about the scam, she blacklisted him permanently. Ben Harding followed. Then so did the rest. Whatever was left of Travis's reputation disintegrated like sawdust in the wind. And then the call came. From Dad. I heard what happened, he said. Is it true? Every word. Another pause. I can't believe it. You raised builders, Dad, I said. But some of us just wanted to own the building. He sighed, long and heavy. You're not going to stop him, are you? I already did. That night, I walked the Crestline job site alone. Concrete curing under moonlight. Beams waiting for sunrise. I stood in the quiet, boots pressed into the dust, and felt something I hadn't felt since this started. Closure. Because revenge isn't just about payback. It's about proving, without saying a word, that you never needed to tear someone down to rise. You just needed to remember who you are. And who you're not. 6 months after Alan's betrayal, and nearly a full year after I was fired by my own brother, JW Buildworks stood tall, literally and figuratively. We'd completed the Crestline project 2 weeks ahead of schedule. We'd broken ground on 2 new mid-sized developments. And most importantly, we were profitable. Not barely hanging on, profitable. Thriving. Steady. Sustainable. Word had spread across the industry. JW Buildworks doesn't just build. They deliver. I had the respect of clients. The trust of my crew. The loyalty of vendors I once thought I'd lost. And for the first time in years, I didn't wake up with a pit in my stomach or a phone buzzing with someone else's emergency. I had built something of my own, from nothing. No inheritance. No shortcuts. Just bricks, sweat, and truth. Then, one quiet Friday afternoon, my father showed up at the site unannounced. He stood there in his old work boots and sun-faded ball cap, eyes scanning the skeleton of the office building going up under the autumn sun. Looks like a real company, he said. It is. We stood in silence a while, just like we used to on job sites years ago, back when I still thought Travis and I would build the future side by side. I thought about selling the company, he admitted finally. After everything. You should've, I said honestly. He chuckled, sad and knowing. Couldn't do it. Too many people still depending on us. But it's different now. Diane's steady. The board listens to her. And we've shrunk down. Focused on what we're good at. No more big dreams. Only the ones worth chasing. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope. I wasn't sure if I should give you this, he said. But I think you deserve it. Inside was an old photograph, 3 men, standing in front of a cement truck. My grandfather, my father, and a young version of me, maybe 22, covered in mud, smiling like I'd just discovered my purpose. Written on the back. Foundations don't lie. I swallowed hard. Thanks, Dad. He nodded and left me there with the photo. A week later, I heard from Sophia again. Jack, she said over the phone, you're going to want to hear this. I braced myself. Travis called. I closed my eyes. What does he want now? He asked if I had any contacts in Colorado. I almost laughed. He's still trying to start something. She hesitated. Actually, he didn't pitch anything. He just asked for advice. Said he's thinking about starting over, for real this time. Said he knows he screwed up. Bad. I didn't say anything. Jack, he sounded, human. That part caught me off guard. Did you give him contacts? I asked. I gave him 3 names. Told them the full story. Up to them whether they call him back. I thought for a moment. Then nodded to myself. That's fair. Is it? She asked. After everything? It's not about fair anymore, I said. It's about moving forward. 3 months later, I was walking through the nearly finished Blackstone job site when I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. I recognized the handwriting instantly. Travis. Jack. I've been out here in Denver, trying to start something small. No more schemes. No more shortcuts. Just, building. Like we were supposed to. Like Dad always wanted. I don't expect you to forgive me. Hell, I don't even know if I deserve that. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. You were never trying to take anything from me. You were just holding it together while I tried to burn it down. I hope we build something better, both of us. T. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then folded it and tucked it in the same envelope as the photo Dad gave me. A year to the day after I was fired, I returned to the old Whitlow and Sons headquarters. Not as an employee. Not for a meeting. Just, to visit. Inside, the walls had changed. Diane had renovated the executive floor. The pretentious art was gone, replaced with framed photos of real builds, crew members, and milestones. At the end of the hall, I found a new display. 3 black and white photos under a sign that read, "The builders who made this possible." My grandfather beside his first concrete mixer. My dad with a blueprint tube under his arm and a cigarette tucked behind his ear. And me, 10 years ago, in a hard hat, shaking hands with a city inspector on the day Meridian Tower got approved for occupancy. My eyes stung. Not with regret. With release. I left the building quietly and drove back to my new office. My office. A place built not from inheritance, but from endurance. I looked around, at the crew laughing in the break room, the engineers in planning meetings, the hum of something real taking shape. Revenge had brought me here. But purpose? Purpose was what would keep me here. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.